Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Film Club Podcast, where every week me and Miss Boo take turns picking films to watch and talk about. Some are good, some are bad, but they are always fun at the Film Club. Boo, how are you?
I'm good, because it's my pick today, and you also made a mistake in your intro. We're the horror club, remember?
Well, we were the horror club, but tonight we welcome you to Fright Night. I'm really glad about that. That was good. That was a good one.
We didn't practice that at all.
Solid. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about tonight, right?
Yes, we are. From 1985. Doesn't get more 80s than that.
It does not. 85 gave us, Back to the Future and Rocky 4. Some of the most 80s movies you can think of.
I love both of those movies.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. But yeah, and we have Fright Night here, which stars Chris Sarandon, Roddy McDowall, and Will... I'm trying to remember his last name. I'm sorry. It's one of those last names that is just, like, really weird to pronounce. Ragsdale. Yeah.
And Amanda Bierce from Married with Children.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of, like, recognizable actors in this that are kind of surprising a little bit.
Yeah. But I mean... Yeah. Think about it, lots of horror movies, that's where people get their starts, or this is where they get that push into bigger projects, films.
Yeah, I feel like Chris Sarandon and Roddy McDowall were already known actors at this point. I mean, granted, they're in the movie a lot, but I don't know how long their shooting days were, so...
Yeah.
Neither here nor there.
That, and I don't know if this came out before Princess Bride or after Princess Bride.
I believe it was before Princess Bride.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, let's just talk about the normal movies so we don't just get bogged down by the years and actors and all that stuff. So, Fright Night, your pick.
My pick, one of my favorite movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, this is on the list. I mean, the list is ever growing, but it's pretty high up there.
Really?
Yes.
All right. When did you see it first? Why is it your favorite, I guess?
I don't remember the first time I saw it. I had to have been a kid. My mom showed it to me because it's a movie that she really enjoys, and it just kind of blew my mind of, okay, the vampire moves in next door, and it's the story of the boy who cried wolf. No one believes me that there's a vampire next door killing prostitutes and just about anybody that's coming into his path now.
Oh, yeah. And it's a really interesting story because it's so simple in concept, but it's really funny. It's really funny how it plays out because this is billed as a horror comedy.
Yeah, and I think out of all horror comedy's probably my favorite genre.
Well, isn't comedy... Well, okay, I know horror is your favorite genre, and then, like, comedy is your next favorite genre.
Comedy's, like, right beneath it, and when you get the two of them together in one, it's perfection for me.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. All right, so, where do you want to get started with this one?
Oh, jeez. There's so many avenues that we could take, but I think we need to tell everybody that funny story that we talked about a little bit in our last episode.
About the first time I ever saw Fright Night.
That was the first time you saw Fright Night?
First time I ever saw the movie.
Wow, I thought you would have watched it, like, growing up, like I did.
No, this movie, I don't know how popular it is, because I've always known it as it's one of those cult movies. And I remember it not being on TV, but every time you'd go to, like, a video store or whatever around the Halloween time, it's always, like... Here's Halloween, Fright Night, Jason, Freddy, whatever.
Lost Boys.
Lost Boys is another one. This and Lost Boys are very... they're not, like, similar movies in any vein, but they go hand in hand really well.
They have comedy. The vampires are vampires. There's no sugarcoating it. And they're good-looking men, but once they turn into vampires, it's like, holy shit.
Big yikes.
I wouldn't want to be near them in an empty alleyway.
Yeah, it is interesting because I've seen Lost Boys before.
Yeah.
I've seen all the other big 80s horror movies, at least the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But no, this one I just never saw before.
Interesting.
And then, I think it was 2 years ago now? 3?
Maybe 3. I was still waiting tables.
Yeah, so it was a couple years ago, and my buddy Reggie says, hey, were doing a showing at the Frida Cinema, which is this revival art house theater in Santa Ana.
Awesome theater. Go if you have a chance.
Very good theater. Highly recommended. And they're going to have an interview with Tom Holland, a Q&A afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, me being kind of dumb and not realizing who Tom Holland was, I assumed he meant Tom Holland, the actor who played Spider-Man.
Yes.
And I was like, that's weird. And I made the comment to him. I was like, wait, Spider-Man's going to be here? Or Spider-Man's going to be there? And Reggie's like, oh, yeah, dude. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, oh, wait, I got to go do something. I'll be right back. And he walks away. He doesn't explain to me that Tom Holland is the name of the director of the film, who is not Spider-Man.
And this is when we cut to Dean texting me at work because he wanted me to go with him to the screening, and I couldn't because it was a work night. They weren't going to let me go. And he was like, boo, you're missing out. You're not only not going to see the movie, but I'm going to see Spider-Man in person. And I'm like...
Spider-Man's going to be there.
And I'm thinking, I'm like, is he a guest? Is he watching the movie too? And you're like, no, he's here to, talk after the movie. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Why would Tom Holland talk about Fright Night after the movie?
So, my dumbass was under the assumption that he was either a huge fan of the movie or there was going to be a remake or a sequel or something that he was going to be involved in. And this was, like, on that media tour. That was my assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out about this, that morning of the showing. So I had no time to, actually think about it. But I gloated at all my friends that entire day that I was going to see Spider-Man.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yeah.
I wish I still had those text messages. Ha! I get to meet Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was a little snarky about it.
Very.
But then, I go and I see the movie. I'm like, this movie's awesome.
Yeah.
And then they're like, and ladies and gentlemen, Tom Holland. And everybody's clapping. And then this old guy gets on the stage. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not... And I turn over to my buddy Reggie, who came with us to the show. And I was like, hey, where's Tom Holland? He's like, oh, no, that's him. That's him. He's the director. I was like, I thought Spider-Man was going to be here. And he looked at me and was like, oh my God, you were serious? And I felt real dumb that day. And the Q&A was awesome, though. He was really cool.
And then you got home and you texted me and you're like, I didn't meet Spider-Man. And I was like, did you really expect to?
I had hopes. I was much more foolish in my younger years. But besides the point. So yeah, I saw Fright Night the first time in the theater with a director Q&A afterwards.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and it was a really good experience. Honestly, I really dug the movie.
Yeah.
And rewatching it for the podcast, because that was the only time I had seen it, was in the theater. And then I rewatched it, and yeah, this movie's actually kind of a banger. I'm a little surprised it's not, I guess it's well loved. It's made plenty of money back. It's a cult classic at this point. But I'm surprised it's not more like a mainstream kind of film. This seems like a really perfect Halloween movie.
It is, and it's out every year. Like you were saying, you go to the video store and you see it on the shelf with the other videos. I mean, most of the streaming services, when it comes to Halloween time, it's there.
It's usually Fright Night 2 is what I've noticed. It's kind of like Creepshow 2.
Yeah.
You can find Creepshow 2 on every streaming site, but you can never find the first one.
You can if you want to pay for it. And it's like I've got the DVD, I've got the VHS, so we're good. We don't need to pay for it.
And it's an interesting little movie, and it's a fun little story I get to tell when this movie comes up.
Oh boy. I can remember how much I laughed when you told me it was the director, not Spider-Man.
I know.
And the heartbreak.
But now let's talk about the actual movie at hand.
Yes.
Where do you want to start? We got movies, we got the production, plot, story, all this fun stuff.
Well, we should probably give them the plot in case you guys haven't seen Fright Night.
Hey, this is your movie.
It is. So Fright Night follows the story of Charlie Brewster, who is played by William Ragsdale, and he is kind of, in this game of cat and mouse with his new neighbor, who goes by the name of
Jerry Dandridge.
Which you wouldn't really think of as a vampire, which goes with him trying to be in hiding.
Yeah, and also looking like, Chris Sarandon, it helps.
Chris Sarandon in the 80s, wow.
Right.
And it's no wonder Amanda Bierce was, easily
just brought in.
Yes. But Jerry Dandridge moves in next door to Charlie Brewster, and he moves in with, I want to say he's a familiar.
Yeah, some sort of zombie dude.
Yeah. He's there to do all of his bidding during the daytime and protect him. Mm-hmm. And Charlie happens to see that Jerry, has a midnight snack one night, and it turns into, oh my god, the vampire next door is going to kill me, and nobody believes me.
Yep. He enlists the help of his couple of friends, his girlfriend and his buddy Evil Ed.
Or Evil for short.
Or Evil. And they don't believe him, so he pulls in Peter Vincent, played by Roddy McDowall, best character in this movie.
He's pretty great.
He's pretty great. And they attempt to defeat the vampire before they become children of the night. Ooh, spooky. It's a really simple story, to be honest.
It is.
But it's really effective because it does enough to just get all the jokes and all the meaning going.
Yeah.
Like, for one thing, this is a lot different than the 80s movies we've seen this month. Granted, the other ones we saw were slasher flicks.
Yeah.
And
this is our first supernatural
one, but it's also a lot, I want to say, lighter. It's at least more lighthearted than the other ones. It's not very, down and dumpy and, it's just like, oh, all these people are getting bloody chunks cut out of them.
No, this movie is meant to be a good time.
Yeah, it's meant to, be a fun ride.
Yeah. But
it feels like there's something under the surface of this movie. At least to me, because I noticed watching it, there's a lot of, discussion going on about, certain things that seem to imply there's deeper meaning going on. I was wondering if you caught on to anything.
Well, would you like to relay what you think were the undertones that you were picking up on?
Something about, STD culture STDs and, the dangers of sex, because we at the beginning Charlie and I forgot Amy, thank you. Charlie and Amy are making out, and he's like, hey, we've been going steady for a year, are we gonna do this? And she was like, no, and it's a whole thing. But that's kind of a theme throughout the movie. Amy gets seduced by Jerry Dandridge.
Yeah.
And it's very sexualized in the seduction. And then once he reaches that, boom, she turns into a vampire.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they trying to relay the dangers of sex in that way? Because it might just be a thing where it's like, oh, vampires are inherently, seducers and you're supposed to be sexy in a way.
And it's also a way of them, bringing in their prey.
Yeah. And the thing
which we've talked about in Dracula, where it was a major theme of seduction.
Exactly. And the thing here that I keep coming back is they're teenagers.
Yeah.
And the sexualization there, and also the time it was made.
Yeah.
I feel like implies something where it's like vampirism is like this, sexually transmitted disease thing going on here.
I mean, it could. I didn't see that on watching the film because I think maybe I've seen it so much.
It's one of those things where you saw it really young and now trying to see it more and more and more. It's like, oh no, this is just beautiful wallpaper. I've seen it so many times.
It's solid gold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see where you're going where vampirism could be considered an STD because you're seduced in by it and then it's something that you live with your entire life, or sadly for Evil Ed, one night.
Right. Hey, at the end he comes back.
He does, and then he dies. R.I.P. Evil.
Exactly. But yeah, I was just curious if there was anything else like that you might have drawn onto, or
no, I didn't even see that.
Really?
No.
Well, is there something you did see that was underneath that? Maybe the message of the movie, quote unquote.
You gotta be careful watching horror films at night. It'll give you ideas.
It'll give you ideas.
It'll give you ideas.
And yeah, it is kind of funny for that one.
I mean, especially after, like you were saying, they have this fight that Charlie, wants to go further and Amy is kind of reserved. And she finally decides, you know what, he's right, let me do this, let's do it tonight. And that's when Charlie sees Jerry for the first time.
And they see him dragging a body into the house.
A body, and then they see him and his familiar dragging the coffin into the basement. And you get that clip of Amy looking at the TV, and they're carrying the coffin to be buried on the moors.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, so I suppose they're also crossing the moors, and he's just kind of like, you know, waving at her to be quiet because he's just focusing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just love that, you know, he wants more, but never mind. We have a real-life horror movie playing outside of my window. That's more important at the moment.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's something to do with, like the obsession like horror fans have with the media or the medium or the genre,
or where you watch so much horror you start picking up on things in real life, and is this really happening?
Yeah, it's
kinda like
your deep-seated fear of going camping because of Friday the 13th.
Well, that, and you're also really clumsy, so I don't want you to be like, oh hey, look at this cool machete, and then whack, or look at this gun or shotgun, boom, gone.
Yeah, totally. That's why. But,
or I was gonna, you know, kind of compare it to when I thought one of my former neighbors, was a serial killer.
Oh, that was a lovely episode of Boo's Paranoia Theater.
Come on. All the stuff I told you about that could have been one.
Or he could have just worked late at night and he was like, gets home and he's like, I just want to hang out in my garage, you know, and relax.
I don't know. There's something not right there.
Of course. But what is right is the actors in this movie.
Yes. Brilliantly cast.
Very well cast. I think the standout, at least what a lot of people I've seen who praise the film, they praise Roddy McDowall playing Peter Vincent, who is this he's this movie star from like the past generation who's in all these like vampire killer horror films. He was basically the Van Helsing of the Hammer films. That,
and the way that he runs his show is kind of like Elvira's Midnight Macabre that she used to run, where
that's literally the what they're taking inspiration from, is like Elvira, Svengoolie, so on and so forth.
And, you know, Peter Vincent is a play on Vincent Price and Peter Cushing. And I know they did an article with him for one of, like, the monster magazines. And he said that he really drew in for this character kind of like the Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, Boris Karloff, where they kind of played these similar characters.
Yeah, I
mean, his character
Cushing's played, oh God, Van Helsing, I don't know how many times.
But he was saying that his character, Peter Vincent, was, you know, the poor bastard that got stuck playing the same role over and over. Not like the other guys where they kind of got to push the boundaries a little bit and be different people.
They worked in the same genre a lot, but they were able to do more than one role in that same genre.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because Roddy McDowall, I will say, is probably my favorite part of the movie. I love Peter Vincent. A lot of the comedy comes from him, and a lot of like I think he has some of the best lines.
He does. But I love Chris Sarandon.
And that's the thing. Chris Sarandon, I don't know what happened to him, because he is like, on paper, 100% leading man potential. And I feel like a lot of the movies people remember him for, he plays the villain. This, Princess Bride.
Not Nightmare Before Christmas. He's the hero in that.
Yeah, not Nightmare Before Christmas, but he's voicing Jack Skellington. But I was thinking about it, you know, because he's also in Child's Play. Yeah. Right? Yes, he's the hero there. But I was so surprised. I'm like, wow, Chris Sarandon's like really good in this. Yeah. Why haven't I seen more movies he's been in?
I don't know. I mean, with Nightmare Residuals alone, you could just kind of cruise on that.
At this point, he probably is like, I don't really need to do that much.
Yeah, I mean, he has a theater background, so he's been in the business for a long time. And when I was doing research for the movie, his vampire prosthetics that he was, you know, in for a good majority of the movie.
The last third act, he's in it a lot.
Yeah. So what I learned was, since he had been, you know, in theater, he actually had practice, you know, putting on prosthetics and makeup. So he would help out his makeup artists. He would put on like his fingers, or he would help with like the face piece. So it's like Chris Sarandon's got a lot of different edges to him that we don't really know about.
And it's really fascinating because when you say, oh, he has a theater background, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Because there's the difference between theater acting and film acting.
Yeah.
Me and my brother, we talked about this not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
When we watched Yankee Doodle Dandy for the Film Odyssey podcast.
What did you think about it? I know we're talking about horror, but I know you hadn't seen it before.
I hadn't seen Yankee Doodle Dandy before, and for, I guess, a spoiler for that episode, not really, because the conversation's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But the whole movie was, like, it was a really sweet, fun, like, nice movie. It was a nice movie.
Yeah.
But overall, I was like, okay, it's pretty so-so acting. It's pretty, like, whatever. Except James Cagney.
Oh,
that man is solid gold.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to see the epitome of an actor carrying a film with his performance, watch Yankee Doodle Dandy. Because James Cagney
is amazing.
Carries so much dead weight. He had to have back problems after that movie. Oh, but it was an amazing performance.
Yeah.
And the whole movie was, like, pretty good. And I've had Yankee Doodle Dandy, the song, stuck in my head for, like, a week.
And the fact that, you know James Cagney from, like, these gangster movies.
Public Enemy, which I legitimately love that movie. That's a really good movie.
And then you see him, transition into the singer where he's singing and dancing. And it's just like, wow, he can do it all.
And bringing it back to Chris Sarandon.
Exactly.
I know him the most as Prince Humperdinck from Princess Bride.
Yes.
Where he's this slimy, cowardly prince who talks a big game, but he's not a fighter. And here we have Chris Sarandon. He's still playing a villain, but he's suave.
Yeah.
He's very much in control. He's manipulative. And he sells the performance of Jerry Dandridge really well. It's very good.
And I grew up with him as Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, where we only get his voice, but we get him as this melancholy king that wants more than he currently has.
Yeah.
So it's just, all around, every time you get a Chris Sarandon performance, it's something completely different.
I've never seen a Chris Sarandon performance I haven't enjoyed. I haven't seen a whole hell of a lot, which is weird. But then we have the rest of the actors here.
Well, and before we jump onto the rest of the actors, we've also met Chris Sarandon.
We did. That was one of the big gifts we went to for you, where you got to meet Chris Sarandon and
Ken Page from The Nightmare Before Christmas. So we got to meet Jack Skellington and Oogie Boogie.
Yes.
We got to talk to him for maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy. What is it? My sister's favorite movie is Princess Bride, and I took her copy of the book, and I had him, like, sign it. And he was like, and it's a Jack Skellington event, right?
Yeah, it's a Nightmare Before Christmas event.
Nightmare Before Christmas event, and I'm there, and I hand him the book, and he's like, big Princess Bride fan, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, there's always one, and I was like, I feel like he probably is a little annoyed that Princess Bride is the thing he's most known for, where he plays the slimy villain.
He looked like he enjoyed having to sign that for you.
I mean, yeah.
And you were like, I promise it's my sister's, and he's like, right, that's what they always say.
Yeah, he did actually say that, and it was good. But yeah, no, he was a really nice guy.
Very nice guy. He's really known for his voice.
Yep.
And hearing it in person just chills.
It creeped you out because he just sounded like Jack Skellington.
Yeah.
Which people are like, oh, the Jack Skellington voice. Oh, he's putting on a performance. He's exaggerating. He's like,
no.
That's basically his speaking voice, which is creepy.
Creepy, but amazing that it's not a show. It's himself. So it's kind of cool that, he puts himself into these roles.
Yeah, so let's get off of Chris Sarandon because we praised him for like 20 minutes.
I know, but we got to meet him. It was so cool.
I understand. But there's other actors in this.
There are.
And I just want to know, because we have William Ragsdale, Amanda
because he was
Beers,
in Fright Night too. I think him and Roddy McDowall, they came back for Fright Night Part 2.
Yeah, actually, Roddy McDowall loved playing Peter Vincent. He wanted to do a Fright Night Part 3.
Oh man, I would have been so down for that.
Yeah, tragically the producer died, and it fell through, so we never got Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall wanted to make this like his franchise. He loved playing the part, and he's like, even if the scripts are bad, I love this character. Just send it.
He
I'll work
really
for
made
cost.
the character his own.
Yeah, like that is something that's crazy, because all the acting in here is like really good. Like, granted, Stephen Jeffries, who plays Evil Ed. Evil Ed is kind of a grating character, at least for me, but I think it's the point. I don't know, because
I love Evil Ed. He's annoying. He's like the annoying little brother that's constantly tagging around and poking at you.
That's exactly it. Evil Ed is everyone's annoying little brother, and Charlie is every guy too nerdy to understand that girls like him,
and is focused on something else other than the people that are actually caring about him.
Yeah, honestly, I was really happy with a lot of the performances in this. It was a very good show.
I mean, even the one cop that goes to Jerry's house when Charlie's like, he's murdering people.
When he dresses down Charlie out front of Danbridge's house, I laughed my tits off. It was so funny. And that goes to like the script and the direction, because so Tom Holland, he was a screenwriter for a long time before he ever made his directorial debut, which is this film, his first film he ever directed. He got really famous for doing like Psycho 2 was his.
Love Psycho 2.
Love Psycho 2. And Class of '84 or some weird films like that. But then he got the idea for Fright Night, and he was like, what if a kid saw a vampire next door? Oh wait, I can't fill 90 pages of that. Screw it. And literally, he had that idea, and then a year later, he was like, that's what the kid could have done. The obvious first choice in these dire situations. Go find Vincent Price to help you kill the vampire.
Vincent Price, Van Helsing.
Yeah. And then he basically wrote the whole script in like 3 weeks.
That, and at the time, I think, who was the studio that this came out of? Was it
Paramount?
So Paramount at the time, they were working on a movie called Perfect and the Slugger's Wife. I haven't seen either of those films, but I guess at the time they thought, okay, these are going to be like our box office movies of the year. So who cares about the horror movie? So Tom Holland said in an interview, it was amazing because they never bothered us. They never questioned us.
It's really insane when a director gets creative control, even accidental creative control. A really famous example is Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
So Gremlins comes out, it's a giant success, and then Joe Dante, the studio's like, yo, Joe, we want a sequel, it'll make us so much money. And Joe Dante's like, I don't really want to. Like, I made a lot of money, but I want to go do other things. And they were like, okay, we'll give you complete 100% creative control of the film and final cut. And he was like, oh, I'm in. And that's why Gremlins 2 was awesome.
Yeah, and to go back to this, with the studio, a lot of studios not having faith in horror films, this was the most financially successful film of the 85 summer.
Yeah, it made 3 times its budget. The sequel got green-lit, I think, before the first week was out.
Yeah, and this one came in, like, right behind Nightmare Before Elm Street 2. And it was just, like, neck and neck that they came in. So it's like, horror does make the money. It's just more people need to believe in it.
Well, the problem with horror as a genre for a lot of studios is horror films make money, but they're not usually critically praised. And the thing is studios like good reviews. They like good critical reviews because that is another end of marketing.
Yeah.
Because, if it wins an award, put that shit on the poster. We can sell this DVD. It's like, come and buy this Oscar-winning film, or releasing in theaters in the double special Blu-ray edition, the Oscar-winning film, or this film won 15 Golden Globes, or whatever.
Yeah.
They like that. Horror films don't usually do that.
But then you see the loyalty and the praise of the horror community. It's like, man, I will stand out there and I will watch this movie that came out in '85 in the theaters.
Yeah, it's the Friday the 13th problem. Friday the 13th had always turned a profit. Yeah. Even the movies that performed poorly still made 5 times their budgets back because they were super cheap to make. People went to go see them. But Paramount hated the fact they had to make them. Yeah. Because they weren't really, like, critically good films. They weren't good movies. They just made money. It's kind of like the weekend gig you have to pay your phone bill. that's basically horror movies for a lot of studios. Now, that's changed. Like, A24 is making, like, art house horror films, really high-end Hereditaries. Blumhouse is basically reviving the Roger Corman model of filmmaking. Give a guy, like, a really low budget, and even if he makes a movie that's pretty good, which usually they are. Get Out was a Blumhouse production. The Invisible Man was.
I mean, The Invisible Man was amazing.
It was very
flawless.
Good. It was a really good... That was your favorite movie in that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was also the last movie we saw in theaters before the world shut down.
Oh, that's right. And it's just a good time. But what else is there? So now I remember my point that I was getting to with Tom Holland and his creative control. So a lot of Tom Holland's legacy is tied up with Child's Play. He's the guy who created Chucky. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people kind of forget he made Fright Night, or Fright Night isn't held in the same revere as the Chucky series, which, granted, the Chucky series got significantly worse as they went on.
Well, that
and it became self-parody at a certain point.
Lost Boys also came out in the 80s, too, so it turned into this thing of, we've got one great vampire movie, and we've got another great vampire movie. They're not quite the same, but they're both vampires, so I think they kind of get...
The other thing is they both played it into, like, the same market of, like, teenagers.
Yeah.
But, like, Fright Night as a horror comedy that's really kind of light in tone, and Lost Boys appealed to teenage girls in a way that I think very few films are able to repeat.
A lot of attractive men in that movie.
There you go. So I think that's probably why Lost Boys survived for so long, as a more like mainstream noted film. It's just...
But it's also a lot of fun too. You have
it's a very good film.
You have the Frog Brothers that appeal to,
the two Coreys.
The two Coreys, the younger kids, the younger guys in the 80s that were like, oh cool, maybe I don't want to be like the vampires, but I want to be like the Frog Brothers that are
Sutherland's in that movie too.
Yeah. It's like young Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah, and it's a really good, well-made movie, and I think that's the thing is when people think of, 80s vampire flicks, they think of The Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Because that was probably the bigger hit, the bigger cult film.
I mean, you could also think of, like, some of the iconic scenes of them hanging beneath the bridge.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's like eating the noodles, and they turn into worms, and it freaks out.
Just noodles, David.
It's just noodles, man. But yeah, and... But my thing here is, do you think this is better than Child's Play, the first one? Like, which do you think his legacy should really be tied to? Because that's the hard one.
That's the hard one. I'm gonna be biased and say Fright Night, because they've both been a part of my life for a long time. Mm-hmm. But Chucky absolutely scared the shit out of me the first time I watched it.
A lot of people who see Chucky as a kid just can't, like, move past being afraid of dolls, I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Chucky, like, when I was maybe 10 or 11, sleep over at my friend's house. We hadn't seen it before, and her older brother's like, oh, hey, you guys could watch this. So we watched it.
Worst decision of your life.
We didn't sleep the whole night. We were so afraid. So, Fright Night is gonna be, I would think, Tom Holland's... legacy, because I mean it just has so many layers to it. It's scary, it's funny.
I would argue depth. it's a better ride than Child's Play. I think Child's Play might be a better crafted movie, but I feel Fright Night just has so much going on that I just dig it.
Yeah,
it's good
because again, like we were saying, it's a very simple story of the boy who cried wolf, and we get Jerry, who's not only suave, but he's after Amy because she resembles somebody in his past that he lost, which was his idea, by the way, Chris Sarandon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That always comes off as, like, a really tropey thing, because this movie deals a lot in, like, vampire tropes. Yes. And they're handled in a way that it's like, yeah, this is a by-the-numbers vampire movie, but it's a lot of fun because the movie's aware that it's a trope. It's aware. It's not playing it like, it's parody. No. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this and make snarky comments about it and wink at the camera. It's like, no, we're playing it straight. The comedy just comes at these characters trying to do this.
Yeah, especially when they decide to do the vampire test on Jerry, and it's the joke between Peter Vincent, Amy, Evil, and Jerry, you know, oh yeah, we're doing this to appease Charlie, to kind of pull him away from the ledge. And it's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna drink the holy water. And Jerry's like, is this really holy water? And Peter Vincent, you know, gives him the wink, like, no, it's just regular tap water. And they're kind of like, see, it's fine, it's good, he's this nice, normal guy. And then
Peter Vincent sees he doesn't have a reflection. It's like, that's vampires. I've seen this movie.
We pull back to Dracula with Van Helsing looking through the mirror, and he's not there.
It's good. It's also a nice little, like, wink and nod to that scene.
To Van Helsing.
Because it's almost a shot. It's almost like a matte shot of that same shot in Dracula.
Yeah, him looking through the compact mirror and him looking back at them and him looking back in the mirror.
Probably one of the most famous, like, vampire shots you can mimic.
And I love that it progresses into when they go to the club. And this is when he has Amy seduced and under his spell, and they're dancing. And you just see, you know, mid-dance when they're going by the mirror, it's just her alone, as she'll look back at him, and then she'll look back at the mirror. I thought that scene was beautifully shot, where she's just going by.
The club is a fascinating scene. Also, yeah, that's how you get an R rating, boys. They are not dancing. They are getting to second base on that dance floor.
Yeah, they are. And also, that club is still around.
That's a real club?
Well, I don't know if it was really a club back in the day, but that building that it was shot in is still very much around. It's in downtown LA, and it is now a DSW shoe store.
Really?
Yeah. So that was one of the places that I wanted to go to photograph, but we didn't have time because at the recording of this, we're going to be going to Midsummer Scream this weekend.
We are.
Awaken the Spirits, so we're not going to have time to do a full-blown photo shoot for Fright Night, unfortunately. I'm very sad about that. But when I was doing my research, it is a DSW store. And fortunately enough for Google Images, there's indoor shots. And yeah, you have the staircase coming down.
Oh, the structure inside's still the same? I thought they would have gutted a bunch of it.
No, I gotta show you the pictures afterwards. It's amazing. You have, you know, the aisles of shoes, which just look weird. But you've got the staircase, which is the star. And then you also have the balcony when he first walks in and he's leaning over and he looks and finds them on the dance floor.
Oh, it always looked like a set to me.
No, it was very much real, and it's still there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta... Let me see. Okay, so we're about a good chunk in, and I feel like we got a good look at this movie.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments you want to make before I hit you with the final question, the hard question?
Let's see. Because I did a lot of location, research for this movie.
Yeah, it's like your favorite part about doing these. It is.
I love it. A lot of it was on, what was it? I think the Disney, like the Burbank backlot.
Really?
That's where Charlie and Jerry's houses are. I can't remember the movie that was shot right before them. So that was a reason why we couldn't go to the houses, because
those are actually sets.
Those are actually sets. But the houses that we passed by going to Pasadena, they're like the historic, like the Victorian historic houses. I can't think of what they're called.
Yeah, in Old Pasadena.
Yeah, like heading to Old Pasadena off the freeway. That was originally the spot that they wanted to film the movies, because those houses have been there forever.
Yeah.
But they didn't do it because of the noise from the freeway.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that would
Speaking as somebody who's worked on movies by freeways, no matter how quiet you think it is, you will always hear a car.
I mean, I've worked sound for you in some of your films, and yeah, the slightest thing will pick up on that mic.
Yeah, and it's wonderful.
But I just thought it was cool that something that we see every day, or not every day, but, you know, every once in a while when we go to Pasadena, that was originally intended to be...
It was this close to being part of movie history.
So close. But I mean, tons of things happen over there, and events, and I think other things have been shot there. So if it comes to me, I'll say the name of it, because it is a cool place, and if you can, visit it. Because, I mean, those houses are not just beautiful, they're historical.
It'd be a good little, like, walking tour.
Oh, yeah, and they always do, like, spooky events there, so if you're very much into that, partake.
All right, Boo. Well, I have my final question for you.
Yes.
So, this film, it got a sequel 3 years later, Fright Night Part 2.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because the producer died, it never got a Part 3. But in 2011, it got a remake. with David Tennant playing the Peter Vincent role.
Yeah.
And that also got its own sequel.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that Mr. Tom Holland is actually writing a new Fright Night film.
Really?
It's going to be a direct sequel to the 85 original because he had no part in the sequels.
Yeah.
So he was writing a sequel and he wants to make it. And my question is, do you think that this series could have sustained a longer film franchise if it was given the opportunity, like as a Friday kind of series, where we get a new one every 2 years, 3, Friday was every year.
Yeah, Friday was every year.
Yeah, then this is probably a little bit more complicated. So maybe one every 2 years, 3 years, and we would have ended up with like 10 of these. Do you think this could have sustained that kind of run, or do you think the concept is probably only good for like a handful of movies?
I mean, for me, I would love to see sequels of this movie. I watched the sequels of Friday the 13th, Freddy, Scream. So even though they, generally get bad as they go along, I'm a sucker for the characters. So I will stick in and, go through it. I think I would go along with a Fright Night franchise, but in my head, I'm gonna know it's never gonna be as good as the original.
Yeah, and there's also that constant is there's no such thing as a good horror sequel. I mean, that's pretty much a meme, but that is a saying in like the horror movie community.
Yeah.
Is most horror sequels generally have the downward trend. They don't get better as they keep going. Yeah. And I feel like Fright Night probably could have sustained another like 2 films out of it. Like I would not be surprised if the producer didn't pass. We would have gotten probably like 4 or 5 Fright Night films before like the 2000s. Yeah. But I don't know the quality of them because I've never seen Fright Night Part 2. So I don't actually know if it's good, bad.
I've never seen Part 2.
Really? Fright Night's your favorite movie and you've never seen Part 2?
Haven't seen Part 2. It's just kind of like, again,
you have that internal horror movie fandom knowledge that it's probably bad. It's
probably bad, but there's no Chris Sarandon. And it's just like...
There's Roddy McDowall.
There's Roddy McDowall, and there's also Charlie in it. Mm-hmm. But... you're moving on to new vampires, and I know in the second story, it is Jerry Dandridge's sister who is, seeking revenge on Charlie for killing his brother. Mm-hmm. Or her brother. So, I'm not really sure when I'll get around to seeing Part 2, but if Tom Holland wants to make another one, I'll definitely be there.
You're behind that one all the way?
And I think as, like, maybe an Easter egg or something, or just to kind of, like, give it to the fans... He should bring back Chris Sarandon as like the Peter Vincent character.
That would be the biggest flex. Mm-hmm. I would be so down with that because Chris Sarandon, like he's an older guy now, yeah. So he would probably play that role really well, and it'd be a cute like wink nod to the audience for this one. It's like, oh, the villain from the first one is now the Peter Vincent role in the new one.
He's the hero now.
Yeah, I would dig it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Charlie's still around too.
Oh, no, he's still alive. He could come, granted, he's now in his 40s or 50s, so he wouldn't, if Tom Holland wanted to make this a direct sequel where they're still, like, teenagers and stuff, it'd be recasted, but I think it would be, it would be good to have them all come back.
Yeah, it could be something, because, again, we're creative people, so we're constantly coming up with, like, different stories. Totally. But it could be something where Chris Sarandon is, the Peter Vincent character. You could bring Charlie back, and then it could be his son that's seeing a vampire, or there's some issue, so it comes full circle to that, he's been a fan of the horror culture, and he can't really jump out of it now.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It'd be a fun movie to see. But with that, Boo, I think that brings us to the end of our little talk of Fright Night. Is that the end?
Well, it's a vampire movie. I don't think it's ever the end.
But next week, what are we watching?
Well, I don't think I need to tell everybody because it's not my pick. Because you're ending our 80s horror month next week.
I am, with probably one of my favorite 80s movies.
It's a good one.
It's a real good one. It is American Werewolf in London, because vampires are cool, but werewolves are cooler.
I beg to differ.
This movie is... Look, American Werewolf in London is a great movie. Yes. I actually got to do a term paper on it for one of my film theory classes, and it was great. So I'm a huge fan of this movie, and I can't wait to watch it next week. We actually got to meet the main actor for that one. I got my my film signed.
We did, so we'll give you that story next week. But where can they find us if they want to find us?
Best place to find us is on our, anywhere where podcasts can be found. Anchor FM, which is our sponsor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all those and more. And you can also find us on our YouTube channel, In the Frame, where you can find this podcast, The Film Club, as well as our sister podcast, The Double Feature Podcast, which I do with my buddy David. We bring two films together, talk about them, compare and contrast them, say if they're good, they're bad, and it's generally a good time, and we get a little high and mighty sometimes and be real pretentious. And we also have the other podcast I'm just starting with my brother called The Film Odyssey, where we're going through the AFI Top 100, counting down to number 1. So 100 to 1. And it's very interesting, because my brother doesn't really watch movies. He's more into, like, reading and philosophy and that kind of stuff.
And us, you can't pull us out of a movie theater.
Yeah, it's true. So it's a very interesting discussion, because so far he's loved all the movies he's seen.
There you go.
But yeah, is there anything else we need to plug before we go?
Well, there is our social media. So you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Film Club Podcast. And I think we're going to call it a day.
All right, everybody. Good night.
You're so cool, Brewster.
All right, peace.